Chapter 8. The Sit-In. Molly and I were split up into different rooms. It was bare and cold, with only 2 chairs and a table. The sickly green walls made me feel worse somehow. I shivered, wishing I had been able to wear a sweater. My sports tank and shorts with flip-flops weren't cutting it in here. They left me alone for what felt like a long time. I didn't have my phone on me. I had left it at my trailer, and I didn't have a watch either, so I had no concept of time. Finally, someone came in. "Ivy," greeted a grim Armand as he took a seat at the table. He had 2 cups of coffee with some creamer and sugar packets. He offered one to me. "Why am I here?" I asked him, relieved it was just him who was here. I might not always like Armand, but he was a familiar face. I wrapped my cold fingers around the styrofoam cup. "Just to answer a few questions," replied Armand. "The chief has made this a lot more intimidating than it needs to be. You aren't going to be charged with anything." I sagged in relief. "Thank you. I will definitely cooperate." "When was the last time you saw Bart Baker?" the detective questioned. He opened a notepad and took out a pencil to take notes. "Yesterday at the farmer's market," I told him. "He showed up at my booth." "Why would he do that?" asked Armand. "He was angry at the attention the celebrity chef was giving me. Fergie from Fergie's Fiery Kitchen was touring the market with Mayor Whitcomb," I explained. "Bart got a little ugly, but he ended up leaving when the mayor promised after the market they would go to the Tasty Treats bakery to see Bart's food." "Was there any strong language? Did Baker make any threats?" inquired Armand as he sipped his black coffee. "Not really," I shrugged. "We might have exchanged a few uncivil words, but I didn't want to be drawn into the drama. I finally asked him to just leave." "Yet Bart made a purchase of your brownies." Armand raised an eyebrow. "He didn't buy them," I replied in a dry voice. "Bart grabbed the package off my table and took it with him. I don't know why." "He was found with one of your brownies in his hand," admitted Armand. "It had a bite out of it." I stared at him in shock. After Ava's assurances Mitzi Bitby liked to enhance the truth, I had discounted the brownie and Bart's dead hand rumor. "You're not serious." "It was your package with one brownie missing from the pack. We found it right in his hand," sighed Armand. "The brownie is currently being tested at the lab." "There is nothing wrong with those brownies," I insisted, then hesitated. Except, you know. They were all from the same batch of batter, and no one else was hurt." "It's very suspicious to find out Bart was competing in the same booth at the farmer's market, then ends up dead with one of your brownies in his hand," noted Armand. "You know I didn't do anything," I told him firmly. "I do know that," Armand acknowledged, "because Molly already admitted to me earlier she was the one to bake the brownies, not you." "She didn't poison anyone either," I cried in frustration. "Otherwise, half the police force would be dead too. I told you, the brownie batter was all one batch. If it were contaminated, everyone who ate brownies yesterday would have been affected." "Can you confirm, for the record, Molly was the one to bake the brownies?" asked Armand. I stared at him, appalled at what he was asking. "You want me to make it so you can arrest my friend, who is innocent of doing anything wrong except making magic brownies?" "Once the lab reports come back, they will show the brownies weren't the cause of death," reasoned a calm Armand. "We're just going to hold her until the labs come back. It would be a couple of days at most." "I'm not going to throw my friend under the proverbial bus." I narrowed my eyes. Armand gave a long-suffering sigh, muttering something which suspiciously sounded like he wasn't surprised at my response. "I want a lawyer," I said smugly. I didn't have to talk. I knew my rights. "You are not under arrest," pointed out Armand in a dry voice. "Then I'm free to go," I guessed. Standing up, I set down the coffee. "I can put you in a holding cell for 24 hours without charging you," came Armand's mild reply. "Are you threatening me?" I gasped in indignation. "Just informing you of what can occur," replied Armand. "Why do you need me to say Molly baked the brownies?" I wondered in confusion. "You said she admitted it right in front of you at the baking booth." "My mental state might be in question," muttered Armand. You mean you were high, I stated baldly, annoyed at him. I wonder why, he gave me a sharp look. Whose baking might be to blame? I'm not pointing the finger at Molly, I stoutly declared. Then you get to stay overnight, shrugged an unrepentant Armand. He flipped his notebook closed, putting it in the pencil in his suit jacket pocket. I snapped my mouth shut. He was the most infuriating man. Draining his coffee, Armand headed to the door, opening it, and waited for me with a raised eyebrow. I'll show you the accommodations. You can change your mind at any time. I'm not changing my mind, I asserted as I swept past him out into the hall. Standing as tall as my meager 5'2" in flip-flops would let me, I lifted my chin and gave him a frigid look. I was not going to let him intimidate me. It gets cold in here at night, said Armand in an offhand manner as he led me back into the building. We keep the air conditioning on, so we don't have to smell any of the drunk sweat. You're not exactly dressed for this. I tried to ignore him as best as I could, knowing he was probably right, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of an answer. I followed Armand down a corridor. He waved to a police officer who buzzed him through a door, and suddenly we were in an aisle surrounded by 4 cells, 2 on each side. What do we have here? A grungy-looking man who had been sitting on a bench stood up, coming to the bars. His beefy hands took hold of the metal. Pretty lady. Be nice, Carl, warned Armand as he opened a cell door. He looked at me expectantly. 24 hours, Ivy. In here. Most of them spent across from Carl. Or you can just admit what both of us already know. Molly baked the brownies. If you sign a statement of what we talked about, you could be home tonight. I stiffened. Then I guess I'm an overnight guest. Armand grimaced. He helped the door open a little wider, and I obligingly went in. Behind me, the door shut with a sense of finality. You don't need to do this, he gently reminded me. Yes, I do. I wandered over to the bench. It was worn, but looked clean. The place smelled of strong cleaners. Loyalty is admirable, but not when it could put you in a bad position as well, noted Armand grimly. With that enigmatic thought, he strode down the corridor and out of the jail cell area. I shivered, wrapping my arms around myself, and sat on the bench. It was going to be a long, cold, and lonely night. I wondered what was happening to Molly. What did you do? Asked Carl as he threaded his arms through the bar, leaning on them. Nothing, I muttered. That's what they all say, laughed Carl uproariously. I decided not to talk to Carl any more. The door at the end of the corridor opened again, Armand striding in with something dark blue in his hand. He stopped in front of my cell, hanging that something on the bars. It does get cold in here. You're going to want this, he said, eyeing my tank and shorts. Without waiting for a response, he walked away, the door banging loudly behind him. I was cold. The air was blasting out of the air conditioning, and I thought I might even feel a breeze. Getting up, I went to see what he had left me. It was a dark navy hoodie from the police department, the logo emblazoned on the breast, and Armand's name on the sleeve. I suppressed a shiver and decided to wear it, even if it was from Armand, with whom I was mad at. Shrugging into the hoodie, I did up the zipper to find it hung halfway my thighs. Pushing up my sleeves, I went back to the bench. I didn't get any hoodie, came a slightly accusatory statement from Carl as he watched me. I ignored him. I hoped Bea wasn't too worried about me. Likely, she would be talking to whomever Jepson Gray was and trying to bail me out. The good news is I wasn't technically under arrest. I could only be kept here for a maximum of 24 hours, then the police would have to let me loose. Perhaps I should start investigating Bart's murder. If the police couldn't figure out Molly and I had nothing to do with this, then I needed to get involved and figure out what happened. Reviewing what I already knew, I decided a lot of people probably didn't like Bart Baker. What I needed to figure out was who had a viable motive for wanting Bart dead. Bart's landlord, Horace Retz, wanted to evict Bart for non-payment of rent. They had argued in front of witnesses. Bart was fighting the eviction, drawing it out, and Retz was losing money on his property with Bart still there. Tristan, Bart's brother, was jealous of Bart's role in a play. It didn't seem like something to kill over, but perhaps it wasn't just the only contentious sibling rivalry bit between the pair. I would have to ask more questions to determine if Tristan could have been involved in his brother's murder. The pastry chef from the White Oaks Resort was being blackmailed by Bart. At least, the blackmail rumor was what was currently being told throughout the gossip chain. I would have to make certain the rumor was true. While I wasn't sure how to do that, I figured Thelma and Bee might have a few theories. I wondered if more people we didn't even know about were displeased with Bart's entitled and bullying attitude. Likely, there would be a long list of suspects. In the middle of my musings, Carl let out a big belch. I wondered what time it was. My stomach let out a rumble, letting me know it had missed supper. I didn't have a watch, nor my phone. I looked around, but did not see any clocks on the walls here. The door at the end of the corridor opened again. This time, a visibly irritated Molly was led down the aisle to the cell past me. I jumped up from the bench, going to the edge of my cell, watching as the police officer put her in the cell next to mine. We waited until he left, before grabbing each other's hands through the bars. "This is so scary," I whispered. I had never been arrested or seen the inside of a jail before. While I had taken a couple of rides in cop cars, this was not the same thing at all. "There are a lot of bark and no bite here," smiled Molly, but her eyes remained worried. "When the lab reports come back stating the brownie doesn't contain any poison, then they will have no reason to keep us," I said, trying to reassure both of us. "We don't know Bart died of poisoning," remarked Molly. "Did they tell you he died of poisoning?" "I don't know." I tried to remember. Maybe I assumed from what Armand told me it was poison. Molly had a huffing laugh. "Why is it you get the handsome detective and all I got was some middle-aged angry cop?" I would have traded. I shuddered, remembering Armand's steely gaze boring into mine during the interview. Armand wasn't exactly impressed when I told him I wouldn't turn you in. "He wanted you to snitch on me? For what?" demanded Molly in consternation. "He wanted me to verify you had baked the brownies and signed a statement," I replied. "I didn't do it, so now Armand is holding me for 24 hours. Afterward, he has either got to press charges or let me go." "Then they really do believe the brownie killed Bart," murmured Molly. "The brownie didn't kill Bart, so there's nothing to worry about," I responded firmly, squeezing her hands. "It's going to be okay." "Ivy," Molly looked at me in disbelief, "we are in jail. I've been in jail a few times. I have a record for not doing so great of things. Sure, they are all petty stuff. Mostly I paid it back, or did community service, and it was years ago, but it still looks bad to have a record." "You didn't have anything to do with Bart's murder," I repeated calmly. Molly being upset was making me even more distraught, but I did my best not to show it. Having both of us being overly emotional wouldn't help our situation. "The police will figure it out and let us go. I might not always like Armand, but he does a good job at investigating things." "Armand isn't the lead investigator," revealed Molly, dropping the bombshell badly. "What?" I couldn't believe it. As far as I knew, Armand was the only homicide investigator in town. Oaks Crossing was not a very big place. It did not need a huge crime unit to police the population. "Since Detective Armand was indisposed at the time the murder was discovered, the chief of police took over the investigation," confided a concerned Molly. "I overheard a couple of officers talking. Apparently, everyone here is walking on eggshells since the police chief is still angry about the magic brownies." I looked at her in trepidation. He isn't exactly a fan of ours at the moment. "I think he might try to pin this on me," gulped Molly, tears coming to her eyes. Suddenly, I didn't feel as confident in our chances. "What is the noise?" an irritated Carl suddenly said from where he was lying on his bench in his own cell. He lifted his head, then bellowed, "Shut up! Can't a person sleep?" I listened and could hear a commotion coming from outside. It was getting slowly louder. Molly looked at me in confusion, and I shrugged. The yelling and banging drew even closer. It sounded like it might be a riot outside. Suddenly, a bang sounded against the window of my cell. The window was high up, covered in mesh and bars. It looked like the end of a ladder had been set against it. Then a head popped into view, hands cupping around the eyes to see into the building better. "Conrad?" I spoke in pure disbelief. Conrad's face lit up when he saw me. "Don't worry! We will get you out!" I could faintly hear him amongst all the clamoring going on outside. "Are those Grandma and Grandpas you live with about to break us out of jail?" questioned an incredulous Molly. "You live with them too," I mildly pointed out. I hoped they weren't going to try to stage a jailbreak. I didn't need anyone breaking the law on my behalf. "Conrad, what are you doing?" I yelled as loud as I could, knowing Conrad was hard of hearing at the best of times. "What?" hollered Conrad, cupping a hand around his ear. "We're having a protest. A sit-in at the police station. They're going to get so sick of us, they'll just let you out to get us to leave." "A sit-in," nodded Molly, "because that makes total sense." "It's better than a jailbreak," I noted, knowing that my seniors were prone to get into trouble. "I would have preferred the jailbreak," wryly stated Molly. "Jepson Gray is working on the legal side," shouted Conrad. "I have to go. We're storming the entry." His head disappeared from view, and I could only hope I wouldn't be seeing my elderly friends become my cellmates here in the jail. Hours later, the singing and banging was still going on outside, and perhaps even inside the building. It was hard to tell. In the meanwhile, we had all retreated to our benches, waiting. Carl was snoring deeply from his cell. I wrapped my hoodie around myself a bit more securely, thankful for its warmth, and curled up on the hard bench. I wished I was back at the campground, in bed with Cookie and Cupcake. Leaking roof or not, the camper had become my home. I sighed. Tomorrow morning, I was supposed to be meeting with Chaz Bison. Chad owned the Mighty Oaks Christian Campground. When he had heard that I wanted a tree cut down, he had offered to do it for free if he could haul away the firewood for his campground. I had been more than willing to agree to the deal. The tree was the same huge monstrosity which had dropped a branch on the clubhouse, creating the hole in the roof Don Miller was supposed to fix. I hoped Chaz would be able to find the tree without me. It looked like I was staying in jail overnight. Shifting on the hard surface, I closed my eyes and tried to get some sleep. Instead, I had nightmares of moving my stuff into the jail cell because it was my new home, but the bed wouldn't fit through the cell door. Carl and Bart Baker had the cell across from mine. They laughed uproariously at me while I tried to drag the bed inside the cell. Molly was nowhere to be seen. Armand just handed me hoodie after hoodie, saying I would need it. I kept putting them on, even though I was already wearing nearly a dozen of the things, making me look like a kid in a puffy snowsuit jacket, which was too large for my body. It was horrible. After a nearly sleepless night, I blearily sat up. My body ached from being on the bench. I was hungry, thirsty, and beyond tired. Carl woke up looking refreshed and ready to start his day. At some point, the noise had died down from the rallying group outside. I realized this was because suddenly the yelling, singing, and clanging began again, as loud as ever. Molly groaned, flinging a hand over her head. A few moments later, Armand came in. He stopped in front of my cell, unlocking the door. "When is breakfast around here?" asked Carl as Armand ignored him. I quickly got up, coming forward, wondering what was happening. "I was wrong," admitted Armand with a wry twist of his lips. "Loyalty can sometimes pay off. You are free to go, Ivy." "What about Molly?" I questioned, my heart in my throat. "She is to be released as well," he confirmed. "I'm still not going to sign any statement which says I saw Molly bake those brownies," I warned him. "Understood," grimaced Armand as he opened my cell door. "No signed statements. Now, don't make a big deal out of the release. The chief is not a happy man right now. He wouldn't be releasing either of you if it weren't for the crowd outside making a nuisance, and your lawyer." "My lawyer?" I asked, a little worried about Bee's friend. I followed him as he went to unlock Molly's door. Armand had a wry smile. "Apparently he's been doing your case pro bono. He's retired, but the mind is still sharp." I had the feeling that secretly, deep down, Armand kind of liked the old folks in this town. "What was all the noise about last night and this morning?" "As if you didn't know," scoffed Armand as he gave me a disbelieving look. "I don't know," I insisted. "I just heard a lot of hollering, singing, and banging." "Well, get ready to hear it again." Armand waited for Molly to come out, and we walked toward the lobby of the police station. The sound was deafening. Dozens of senior citizens were stuffed into small space. banging lids, metal scoops with pots and pans. They hollered and sang. They marched around in tiny pressed-together circles. Some had taken out camp chairs, sitting calmly sharing coffee from thermoses with their neighbors. I spied Agatha knitting and singing as she sat in one of the chairs. "Ivy!" Bee cried, coming forward to envelop me in a hug. "I knew we could free you. We staged a sit-in. We've been here since supper last night, protesting the arrest of you and Molly." "Thank you," I said in surprise, patting her lightly on the back. "I'm grateful. They're going to let Molly and I go." "Success!" Bee let go of me, waving her hands at the crowd. "We win! Ivy and Molly are coming back." "Don't you dare think you can take our girls again," threatened a bird like Agatha as she got up from the camp chair. She poked a tiny bony finger in Armand's chest. "We seniors have voting power." "Agatha!" I was aghast. I quickly grabbed her hand. "You can't assault police officers." "Quiet, everyone!" a bullhorn bellowed. The chief of police continued to address the crowd. "I want all of you out of the building. Miss Thurman is going to sign some paperwork, then she and her friend will be released." I was hugged by nearly everyone on their way out of the building. This meant it took even longer to get the crowd moving outside. The chief of police was turning an even deeper shade of red, and I wondered if he was going to have a mini meltdown right there. "This was so much fun," squealed Thelma in my ear as she hugged me. "We should do it again sometime." "I would prefer not to repeat the experience," I managed as she squeezed me. Thelma trilled a laugh and moved on, chatting with other people from the Happy Camper Resort. "It was a swell time," glowed Bertie. He shook my hand and patted my shoulder. "Glad you're free again, Ivy." "Thank you. Now, promise me you will make Conrad stay off ladders," I replied. "Can't say that," Bertie responded merrily. "Never know when it might come in handy." "Here, Ivy, I saved you a cup of morning java." Herb handed me a mug. "Coffee," I sighed in delight, taking a sip. Bold flavor hit my tongue and taste buds, nearly making me choke as the whiskey fumes hit my nose. I swallowed my sip down quickly, handing the mug back. Drinking and the police station? What was Herb thinking? The coffee is a little too strong for me. Thank you for offering, Herb." Finally, the group of protesters had exited the building. I turned to find Armand waiting with the paperwork. "Don't think you are getting off lightly, Miss Thurman," warned the chief of police. "These little stunts of yours are getting out of hand. I might be bowing to public pressure right now, but when I find evidence to put your friend away, I'll personally be making the arrest." "She didn't do anything," I protested. "Threatening a person isn't very smart," a mild voice reprimanded. "In fact, it could prejudice the case should it ever go to court." "Get out of my precinct, Jessam!" thundered the police chief. "Ladies, the items we took from you are right here in this bag, if you will just sign for them," Armand inserted before the two men could argue further. Molly signed, retrieving her phone and some money. I signed for my keys. "Chief, you need to see this!" A young cop with a round face came hustling forward, waving a set of papers in the air. "The lab results are back from the autopsy. It was poison, just as you suspected." "Aha!" The chief's beady eyes gleamed in satisfaction as they fixed on Molly. He had a wolfish grin as he anticipated arresting her.